let's start with Curt Schilling from ESPN. This was on the front cover of the Boston Globe today, so everybody's talking about it. Curt Schilling, former Red Sox pitcher, ESPN analyst, he shared a meme that was going around Facebook about a transgendered man, essentially saying that Obama wants to protect this guy's rights. I have the wording somewhere around here, but and anyone who speaks out about him or something, you know, one of these right-leaning, ridiculous, conservative oversimplification and downright transphobic meme. It got around and he was fired from ESPN today. ESPN said that they are an inclusive organization, and basically what Schilling represents does not represent ESPN. And so we're thrown back. One, I mean, you can have your opinion over the firing, and I know a lot of people disagree, and I know a lot of people agree. But it really throws us back in that conversation, Noah, about freedom of speech and the penalties that are attached to that freedom, because you're not protected. Your freedom is not protected from your employer. Your freedom is protected from the government. And you can get out here and say anything you want, yes, but there are ramifications for your words. And ESPN wasn't having it. Did you hear about it, and what did you think?
Well, I did skim through the article when we were talking about it a little bit earlier, and on the one hand, I understand when people get upset, right? Because people are individuals and they should be allowed to speak their mind no matter what. But at the same time, we talk about brand management, right? We talk about companies and corporate control. Corporations have a certain brand, they have a certain accountability and responsibility. So even if there are fans out there that would agree with him, there are all these organizations that do crack down and come down if, we seem to be giving any credence to groups or individuals in this case, right? Who would, especially with the climate we have today, you know what I'm saying? Yep. So like we have, where we're talking about like the legal stuff going on in North Carolina and Mississippi, the failed attempt here in Georgia. Well, I mean, it passed the legislature, but the governor felt the pressure. But that pressure, ESPN they don't want the blowback. They do not want, the boycott. ESPN is thinking about the bottom line and their dollars, and they're not going to let people, they're not going to let people get in the way of their bottom line. They're not going to let people get in the way of ultimately their money and stuff like that. So I know people are like, well, I have the right to say what I think. You do, but just because you have the right to say what you think doesn't mean anyone. Exactly. And that's have
to live with that, because they're corporations who, like you said, they have to protect their, there are a lot of people. I'm the only idiot out here. Actually, I might not be the only one. Is Noah Changa your real name?
Noah Changa is my name. I won't tell you my exact full name, but that is my real name.
So you and me, we're the only foolish ones out here with our real names, because say things. People, the first thing we do today is we try to go and get you fired. Right. Thankfully, I work for a corporation who has my back in a lot of ways, and they're very down to earth, but I still do my best to protect them. But when you represent a organization, whether you say something controversial or not, you could just say, I like President Obama, and you have people who will go out there and try to get you fired as a result. Matt Brunig on Twitter from Demos, and he's has a phenomenal blog, commentator, and analyst. Everybody knows Matt. He's had people try to oppose to get him fired because he supports Bernie Sanders, and this could tie right into the story out of Chicago with the principal who opposed Rahm Emanuel, supported Bernie Sanders, and he's been suspended. So the first thing we do today, the only thing I disagree with, is the very first thing we do when we run into somebody we disagree with or somebody that says something we don't like, is we try to get them fired. This happens on both sides of the aisle. However, ESPN did this. ESPN said, hold on, Curt, you're not going to take us down with this transphobia. And so they did have to protect their brand, and they have every right to do that, just like he had the right to say what he said.
Well, and it's just that, these, what I was going to say, these people always find another place to land, right? Like Don Imus, the nappy-headed host comment, the uproar, Don Imus must go, but he ultimately ends up finding another home. I'm like, ultimately there's somebody out there that's going to put up with your brand of you,
You just have to find him.
Do whatever you're doing. So, but but I think
he's gonna end up on Fox News real quick. He's gonna
And the other thing is, I think on the one hand, we want corporations to exercise their freedom of speech. We want to treat corporations like people, but then at the same time, we want to act like, oh my God, corporations are overstepping their boundaries. You can't have it both ways, right? Like, so you can't say that corporations are people. Corporations are entitled to act as people in the marketplace. Well, if they're a person as an individual, I have the right to protect my brand. Yeah. So if we're accepting this to be true, then we have to accept the fact that corporations are going to act in their own best interest. Even if people in the corporation agree with your personal viewpoint, they understand what their bottom line is. And everybody's money is green. And I mean, but from a social perspective, a lot of young people, especially a lot of young men, look to ESPN. Whether they're looking to ESPN for actual information outside of sports statistics and stuff, ESPN actually does serve a socialization purpose, in today's society, and we can't tolerate certain conversations happening right in mass media like that. Like we let Fox News do whatever it's doing for whatever reason, but other groupings we just can't. And someone was saying that they think that they were all warned before not to talk about politics, and that's another thing. If you were warned, if your employer says don't do this, I mean, what?
Which would be weird because they do let Stephen A. Smith talk about it, but I think that has to be in his contract because he has he has a show where he wants to say. But it's a complicated situation because this is my motto: if you live by the sword, you're gonna die by the sword, and that politically and career wise. And even if you don't live by the sword, people are gonna come after you anyway because that's what we do. If you say something that we don't like, if you say something that's not politically sound or politically correct, or if you say something that's offensive, you're gonna get fired because that's what we do today. I honestly don't necessarily agree with that, but if you understand that's how this world operates, then you better be smarter than the average bear, Curt Schilling, and you better watch what you say, especially because if what you're saying is going to be the voice of a major platform, yeah.
Well, the problem too is also with something that's so inflammatory and detrimental to individuals, because there seems to be this thought that because someone is, and we saw this when we had the Matthew Shepard case, for example, right? There used to be this sense that because somebody was gay or lesbian, that you could just do whatever to them because they were quote unquote different or not normal or whatever the rationalization somebody used. Not that. Just to clarify, not that I think that that's not normal, but that's what people's train of thought would be, right? Same thing now. We see that happening with trans individuals, and they even have there is even internal, community issues over the situation. So people saying inflammatory or derogatory things towards people who are who consider themselves, who identify as transgender, that's a problem. That's a personal safety issue for many people. My brother-in-law is considered is trans, is a trans male. There are real implications for people, and
absolutely,
and we can't tolerate hate. I mean, we just can't tolerate that. Even if he doesn't mean it that way to be hate speech, that's a problem. So
I agree. I definitely agree with that because of the nature of
the climate right now.
The climate right now, and I definitely agree with that. Now, this is it's not complicated, but you have to take everything into consideration. Can he say whatever the hell he wants to say? Yes. Should he have gotten fired? That's up to ESPN, and he did get fired. Good for them. Good on ESPN. Glad that they made that decision. It's still a very complex situation for me personally because it represents the competition of freedoms, and I don't think anybody should have a moment feeling sorry for Curt Schilling whatsoever. But you still look at it. I look at it holistically and say it's a competition of our freedoms. And to take it away from the trans community because of that particular climate, I would bring up the not Don Imus, but the owner of the Clippers. I can't think of his name right now. What's your name that owned the Clippers? Somebody. Anyway, when he had a private conversation in his home about how he doesn't like black people, Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I was the most unpopular person in my circle at that time, because to me, I was like, this is something that he said in the privacy of his home. He should have a right to say that without people, sabotaging him, taking it from his home and making it public. Because if you have a right to be a bigot anywhere, you should have Donald Sterling. Thank you. I knew it was Don something. Yes, Donald Sterling. If there's anywhere in the world you should have the freedom to be a bigot, it should be in the privacy of your own home. Now, this is something different than this case with Curt Schilling, because Curt Schilling was an idiot and said it publicly. And maybe we're glad he said it publicly because he can suffer the public ramifications. But I like to look at these types of situations through the lens of competing freedoms, because the transgender community has the right to be free to exist without this type of harassment and this type of this threatening life threatening environment. And Curt Schilling should be free to say this, but ESPN is also free to fire his ass. And so to me, it's not the end of the story, because it's a complicated story that's going to repeat itself over and over again until I don't know if this will ever end. People are going to always say something bigoted, and then we're going to have to decide as a public square and as companies and corporations, how much of that bigotry will we tolerate? And we're at a point now where we just don't tolerate it in the public square. And I honestly think that's a good thing. I think that's just the way the world is. And you have to be smart and don't say stupid shit. So, I'm sorry, like that, like what I just said.
It's probably better business it's from a business standpoint, considering the way the marketplace is, it is probably a better move corporate wise to just handle a sassy employee and possibly face backlash, because you don't
look at North Carolina. Look at North Carolina; they're losing all this business, and it's
the NBA has now said they're not going to have the game in 2017. If they don't do something about that law, the All-Star game will not be there in 2017. That's huge revenue for the state.
That's huge. And then North Carolina people, whoever's in office right now, they're going to get the boot, because if you take away the NBA games, the All-Star game, that's a wrap for you as an elected official. But it just speaks to, it's bad business to be a bigot. Bottom line, it's bad business to be a bigot.